Welcome back, everybody, to the Rec Room podcast with Brian Rector and today Jordan Robinson, who I definitely understood who Jordan was through, ironically, Michigan State assistant coach for women's basketball, Joel Weimer, and was able to kind of do some research and understand the different elements to what she does, which include podcasting, hosting, particularly, and then as well covering the WNBA, covering FIBA events, and the way I see it, just an all-around aficionado of women's sports, but then also as we narrow down the game of women's basketball. So I'm so excited to be here with somebody who's in the industry that I'm trying to break into, you know, and beginning that process of it. But I think it's so important, Jordan, that we can have these conversations and be able to learn and grow, especially in my case. I'm like, I gotta know how this thing has happened for you. How have you gotten to where you're at? So with that background, first off, thank you for being here. That's a number one. And second off, where I want to go to immediately is that we know, or for those of us who don't, that you played basketball at Point Loma in the outskirt of San Diego. And from there, started to become a journalist, but it was, I don't want to say, I'm hesitant to say unconventional, but it started from the frame of reference of not sure which direction to go with it and looking to try and carve out the identity in the realm of journalism. So that's where I want to begin is, okay, you're in college, you're working on this thing, and you kind of jump around a little bit. What did that look like in those moments for you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Brian, for that incredible introduction. I am so excited to chat with you and be here. Yes, I would very much say my route to where I am is unconventional. My resume makes no sense. My LinkedIn doesn't make any sense at all. I've had people just say, "Wait, what? You were a senior editor at 24?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're just gonna roll with it." So I was in college. I was playing basketball, like you said, at Point Loma Nazarene University. And being a college athlete, as I'm sure all of your listeners know, it is grueling and tough and takes up all of your life and all of everything. So when I was going to Point Loma, one of the reasons I picked that school was because of their journalism program and how you can really put into practice writing and getting published. And I loved that. But I did not want to write about sports because that took up all of my life. And I was like, I don't want to go to games after I just played a game and write about a game and talk only about games. So I wanted to do fashion. I wanted to do um, figure out the intricacies of how faith can be integrated into fashion. I wanted to go to New York Fashion Weeks, and that's what I was going to do. I was going to move to New York and I was going to write for Vogue magazine all about fashion. But that didn't happen because it doesn't always happen exactly how we think it would. After I graduated, or I would say back up, I got injured my senior season and I hurt my shoulder and I didn't get to finish out my senior basketball season. But in that time, I was able to research jobs and I was able to go on interviews earlier than probably I would have if I was playing all the way up until, we went to the tournament probably about March. So I saw this job that said we're looking for an editor and it was in Orange County. And I said, "Oh, I'm not an editor. I'm new. I'm new to this. So, do you need a editorial assistant?" I just emailed the publisher. Who does that? I just emailed the publisher my resume. I had a website. I said, "Hey, I don't think I'm an editor, but if you need some other help, let me know." Long story short, I got the editor job and I became an editor of this lifestyle small magazine and I got to practice all different areas. So, food, fashion, lifestyle. But while I was there, I kept gravitating towards the athletes. Anytime we needed someone to interview an athlete, Antonio Gates was my first cover story while he was with the San Diego Chargers. I was like, wait, this is so cool. I can actually relate in a different way than I know my other cohorts can. And that led to taking a job at The Ringer, which is a national sports pop culture website. But I started all the way at the bottom. I was a fact checker, but that meant I got to read a lot of the great writing that all of the journalists at The Ringer were doing. And I just took notes. I was, copy and pasting paragraphs that I thought were written very well. And I just learned a lot. Also at The Ringer, I learned about podcasting and how you can do a story and tell a story in an audio format. I heard myself for the first time on a microphone and I went screaming. I was like, okay, never doing that again. Just kidding. I do podcasting now for a living. So, I think the root of it was storytelling, and I wanted to find all these different ways to tell stories. And I think now being on camera, hosting, you're telling the story of maybe the person you're interviewing, or you're able to visually see an area, a gym, a sports story. Women's basketball has always been close to me because that's something that I played. And now being able to write, host, talk about it, any form that I can find, I'm going to tell people about women's basketball. So it's come full circle of not wanting to talk about sports to only talking about sports now.
Jeez. First off, thank you for going through that. I think that's
Yeah, that was a lot, but yes.
yeah. No. But full disclosure, it's not too much, and I think it is necessary to understand how we've gotten here. So thank you.
hmm
Um,
Yeah.
but in that, I have to ask, is like, okay, I'm at Michigan State. I'm a senior now. I've been working on different various projects throughout my time here.
hmm
Why is it important? Because I think you hit on something great. Why is it important to be so versatile and be able to do different domains, different media, venues, and just be that all-encompassing person who's multifaceted?
It absolutely is important. And I think when I go back to college, now they don't even have a print journalism degree at my school anymore. Now it is a media degree because you have to wear so many hats, which I'm sure your program does too. So I got all these introductions to podcasting. I remember that my professor was like, hey, just everybody record a quick 5-minute podcast. I recorded in my car about outfits to wear to job interviews. Like that was my first intro to podcasting. But it's so important because now today I can go to companies and I can say, hey, WNBA, I can write the script. I can shoot the video. I can be in front of the camera, and I'm a one-stop shop. So these companies and businesses, they're looking for people that can do a little bit of everything so that they don't have to hire a bunch of people to do certain things. I think the thing that I'm currently working with and going through is continuing to look at that as a positive and not necessarily saying, well, okay, am I a jack of all trades and a master of none? Like that's
Mhm.
kind of my interpersonal thing that I'm battling. I'm like, okay, well, people are really, really good at hosting because that's all that they do and they went to school for it and they are broadcast journalists and that is what they do. I didn't do that. So I'm just kind of going off of vibes and my energy and my smile. Is that enough? Is that okay? Because I can do a bunch of different things. So it's definitely a catch 22, but I know what I've heard from people is that having the basis of writing helps you in so many areas because there's a lot of people that don't know how to write. And if you can write a good story, you can put it and fit it in the box of all these different mediums. And I'm proof of that because that's what I'm doing right now.
Mm, mm. A few weeks ago, actually, I got to tell you this. On the Rec Room, I hosted Beto Duran, who works with the Lakers, in doing their on-camera hosting and analysis. And he told me when I asked a similar question, he said, and I thought it was so profound. He said, "You as being where you're at, a senior in Michigan State and beginning to make it into this industry, you need to read. Because if you do
Mm,
that, you figure out how to write. And if you figure out how to write things on a page, then you can figure out how to say them. And I went,
yes, that's
oh,
really good.
wow, I hear you. And what you're saying too, that connects very well, I feel like. That makes sense to me. Is just
Hmm.
everything feeds off of another. And if you can get one of those down, then maybe the other couple will follow suit. I love what you said.
Absolutely. And I would say, I started working on Pac-12 networks last year as an on-camera host for um, pregame show, halftime, postgame in studio. I'd never done that before. Never. And I didn't even know that was a dream of mine, probably 2 years prior. But when I got the job, the talent director who hired me said something that has stuck with me ever since. And he said, we can teach you how to do the mechanics of having a producer in your ear, tossing to break, but we can't teach you the passion that you have for the game. We can't teach you how to write your own scripts or how to write your openings or, write your highlights. You have that. And I hold that close because that's what I try to go off of. If you love sports, if you love women's basketball, if you love whatever it is that you're talking about, that's going to be the basis because there's a lot of people who are professional hosts that will be in front of a camera, are really technical and they know what to do, podcasting, whatever. But if they don't love the game, there's a lot of companies that would rather hire the person that has the passion, the fire, the ambition than maybe a more just technical
Mhm.
person. And so I take heart in that because I love basketball and I love how that shines through anything that I work on. Everything else will fall in place.
Oh my gosh. That was awesome. Passion driving action. I'm like
Mhm.
so excited that you mentioned that. Obviously, when we were off camera, I mentioned to you that I was in Columbus, Ohio until the wee hours of the morning. I feel like in my heart, that's all that was, is like I cared about being there and about
Mhm.
seeing those people and about making that happen. And then that drove the action. I didn't want to go to frickin' Columbus, Ohio for 9 hours. Like, come on, just to turn around. Like, are we serious? But it's about why you're doing it, right? And
Mhm.
that was just phenomenal. When you mentioned, and this was cool, you mentioned Pac-12 network. What the heck happened with the Pac-12 and
It's
then
so sad.
becoming what it is? I was like, oh no. And I thought it was interesting that you said that because we're speaking about 1 year ago. And today we're sitting in a completely different spot. So, from your point of view, being in that network, like how are we here?
I wish I knew. There were conversations way above my pay grade that were happening that made this happen. But I call 2023 my Pac-12 year because I started January 3rd or something like that doing the in-studio shows. I was going to the Pac-12 tournaments. I was hosting. I was sitting down interviews with the athletes. And then about that time, it was like, oh, actually, this is not going to be a thing next year. One by one, the school started falling off. I will say that from my experience, even just being a host, my parents watch every single thing that I do, and they had a really hard time finding Pac-12 Network. It was just a tough situation on how to watch the games and how to watch even me. Like my parents are like, wait, we have to buy something else. And how do I get this? It's only on this app. And
Yes.
I'm sure it's frustrating when you are a player and you're trying to go to the NBA, you're trying to go to the WNBA, you're trying to go to the NFL, and scouts can't even watch your games. And so there was a media deal that was being put in place, but teams didn't feel like it was the best option and they started bouncing left and right. That's my understanding. Again, I'm not in those conversations, nowhere near. There were people, though, that have been with Pac-12 Network since the beginning 12 years prior, when it was Pac 10. And those people lost their jobs. And that was just so gut-wrenching to go through the whole football season because I was the host of Pac-12 Tailgate. I got to
Mhm.
go to every single school, see all those fans mourn the loss of the Pac-12 and how great of a conference it is and how great of competition it is. So technically the Pac-12 is not completely gone. They are still the Pac-12 and they're trying to rebuild by adding different schools, and we're seeing those announcements come in. Will it still be a Power Five conference? We're not sure. But all of the people that work behind the scenes, the producers, the cameramen, the directors, the talent, that's what made that conference and that network so amazing. So it was hard to be a newbie, a freelancer, come in. I'm not working full time, with this network, but just see the sadness of going through that whole year of people just like, gosh, we had something so great. And now because of football, a lot of it because of money, getting the student athletes are the ones that got the short end of the stick, especially. So you saw a lot of transfers out. You saw Tara Vanderveer retire. Like a lot of things just kind of went up in smoke, and it was a very weird year. But I miss Pac-12, the old Pac-12.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there were a couple different things that caught my ear when you were saying that. One is the idea that these different programs were mourning. That's absolutely
Mm,
true. I mean, being from Oregon, having seen what happened with Oregon and Oregon State, I feel like that's a great word to use. But then on the flip side, and you said it earlier, let's talk about the competition because
mm.
in a lot of ways, what this thing was geared towards was having generational matchups that could only happen if there's a conglomerate of, borderline professional programs that are dueling against each other on a weekly basis or a nightly basis. In your estimation, and I know we were talking about it off camera a little bit, but there have been so many unique matchups, and there's been more catered to audience kind of performances early this year in women's basketball. Like, what has this whole thing done to generate more excitement? Because I feel like that's been happening.
Absolutely. And it's a lot of those programs. I'm just taking a USC, for example, a Juju Watkins, who was freshman of the year and had an incredible freshman campaign. She is a bucket. Not a lot of people were able to watch her Pac-12 games last year. Now you go and I watched the game on Saturday. It's on Peacock. It's on more mainstream networks and more easily accessible and more people to become fans of women's basketball, which is the ultimate goal. And so even though we're sad and disheartened by the conference realignment, how can we grow this sport? How can we grow the most fans possible is always the goal. So just so happens that, okay, now they're in the Big Ten and they're going up against these different non-conference schedules already so far. Well, take that back. USC and Notre Dame is a Big Ten matchup, which is so exciting because I can't wait to see them play again. But how can we grow the sport? And if that means more eyeballs on women's basketball based off of being in these different conferences, these matchups being scheduled in November and December, not having to wait until March Madness to get those eye-popping viewership numbers, then I am all about it. I support that because that's the main mission.
Yes, yes. And so importantly is we know it's been growing and there are a plethora of reasons why. But what is your take on where it is? And do you think that the growth and this continued movement is entirely sustainable? What do you think?
I definitely think it is because it is growing. Well, I know that we are in a boom right now, and it feels that way. It feels like everybody is talking about the W. They're talking about women's college stars. I think 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe if you went to someone and say, name five WNBA players, name three WNBA players, it would be a little bit of a struggle. Now
Sure.
I think it's just more water cooler talk, right? It's more conversational. It's easier and more natural to talk about women's basketball, which is exactly what we love. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I am currently writing a book on the history of women's basketball. So to be able to see sold out arenas back in the 70s of, 18,000. Like, this isn't new that women's basketball is good. It's just new and more mainstream in this form and social media and all of these things that are new. But women's basketball itself and the talent and the love of the game is not new. And that's been my favorite part of going through the history of women's hoops, of the talent and the scoring records and all of these things have been there. And so when you hear stories or when you give a lot of praise to Caitlin Clark, who is a phenomenal basketball player, you have to think about, okay, Megan Gustafson was also at Iowa a few years ago, and she set a national record, both men's and women's in scoring in D1. So it's like, okay, we could just go back a few years. Now let's take it all the way back to Vivian Stringer, who was a coach at Iowa. They made it all the way to the Final Four. So that's just one program, and I can get
Yeah.
super nerdy and in the weeds about it, but it's exciting because it's so now. And these past 5 years, we as WNBA fans, as women's basketball fans, have been like, it's coming, it's coming, it's going to be so great. Get ready, get ready. Now we can sit back with our arms folded and be like, I told you so. Like, this is what we've been telling you. The
Mhm.
talent is exceptional. So, how can we get the most eyes on that? That's what we're trying to, it furthers our agenda of how great women's hoops is.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 I think one thing that you just mentioned is the historical trends that new eyes to the game maybe, I don't think like non-acceptance is the right thing, but just don't
Mhm.
know, just don't have that background. What has it been like for you? We talked about writing the book, so I want to go deeper into it. Is like uncovering this wealth of knowledge and information, being able to read about it, deepen your own understanding of what has happened here. What has that been like? And the idea for the book, where did that all come from?
It's been so fun to uncover all of these crevices of women's hoops history. It's
Mm,
been phenomenal. I was presented with this idea from a literary agent, from a publisher, to co-author this book on the history of women's basketball. I'm co-authoring with a phenomenal Sports Illustrated journalist, Emma Bachelari, who has covered a lot of MLB, baseball, but also women's basketball. And we are having so much fun texting each other. Our weekly meetings, we're like, wait, I learned this, I learned this, and I got to talk to these people. And it's been a dream, really, because I grew up in Sacramento in the early 2000s, and I was a huge Sacramento Monarchs fan. Tisha Pinachero is my all-time favorite player. And the 2005 Monarchs championship was amazing to me and my life as somebody who thought she was going in the WNBA and then was like, okay, you're only 5'5". Let's get reality. So now I get to talk to these people and write about it and be such a fangirl over this league. But I think the best part has been the lesser known names. Maybe the women who set some records or did made history at the time, but isn't talked about a lot.
mm,
Lucy Harris comes to mind, who in the 70s was hailed the queen of basketball. She was everything at Delta State. And we
mm,
don't really talk about her as much. I don't think we talk about Cheryl Miller as much for everything that she did in the 80s. She personified 80s women's basketball. So we're
mm.
breaking it down decade by decade, all the way back to the 1800s of when women's basketball was really birthed in the US. And we're going to break it down all the way to the present. And it has been just a ride. I told you that it is an expedited writing process. So I don't think I can be in the hole of research for too long. But man, I love it there. It's been a lot of fun.
Is there anything that has overwhelmed you about approaching that and tackling such a distinct project? Because you just threw out the date of the 1800s, and I'm sitting here saying, we're in what? Is that 2025? Like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay, so what, like, have you been doing okay with getting through that? Like, what is it like to break it down and to kind of make it into these digestible, periods of time?
I think I'm doing okay. I hope I'm doing okay. I've never written a book before. I have written articles, I have researched, I've done, investigative journalism to a point in sports, but I have never written a book. And the process and the word count and making sure everything flows together is very challenging. It is a new challenge because I've never done it. Especially how we're breaking it up by decade and having a co-author. We're kind of letting the photography really run the book, but there's going to be essays and there's going to be certain players and leagues that we want to dive more into. So we're kind of picking apart which spotlights, I guess we could say, that we want to do. So we're going to have a whole Pat Summit article that just highlights what she does and who she was as a coach because we have to, certain things like that.
Sure.
But I think the hardest thing for me going into this was doubt. Was a lot of it
Mhm.
was, am I like, why me a little bit? Especially when you're asked to do something like this. Am I ready for this? Am I a big enough voice to carry this? All of those questions come into my head, and it was really hard to just start writing. It took me a while to actually put words to page because I had a lot of those doubts in my mind. I still have them. Does this make sense? Is only my mom gonna like this? Like, is this gonna actually sell? So a lot of those questions roam through when it's your first time doing anything. Feel like I've had those at multiple stages of my career when it's your first. So I'm kind of going through that, but it has been challenging. But like I said, it's been so much fun. And I had to sit back and say, you're not writing a book on rocket science. You're not writing a book on something that you don't care about. You're writing something on everything you care about and the fun parts of those things. So remind yourself of that. And that's what's getting me through it.
Mm, mm. Well, oh my gosh. One thing came to mind immediately, like as Bow Wow wrote in his song, we're playing basketball. That's it.
Yes.
That's it. Um, a lot of that discussion that you just mentioned about having doubt and about sorting through things, when I think of that, I think about faith and belief and two cornerstones of what you've been working on. And I know earlier you had mentioned about speaking on and crafting stories around the nuance of introducing faith into everything that you are doing,
Mhm.
which is why I want to go to this place now, Jordan, is how has it been for you to integrate your own faith and belief about spirituality and things related to this into this industry and into the public persona? How have you, kind of navigated that?
I love that question because I'm still navigating it and it does take navigation. I think especially in the entertainment sports industry, you have to have values or else you are going to be pulled in so many different directions. A little bit of my testimony is that I didn't become a Christian until I went to Point Loma Nazarene University. So I didn't grow up necessarily in a Christian household, going to church, all of those things. I didn't read the Bible for the first time until my Old Testament and New Testament classes at Point Loma. So it was an overwhelming introduction to the Christian faith for me. But what made me gravitate towards the faith was the people and how everyone at Point Loma and now my best friends for life, they were all at my wedding. I was all in their weddings. Like how they treated me and how I saw them treat others. And that was the number one thing that attracted me to this faith. And that is how I try to be. I don't think in my sports reporting, I can flat out go on a tangent specifically about God, but I can be myself in how I interact with people, how you
Mm,
see me on camera, how
mm,
I talk to people, how I talk to a fan, how I am trying to be Christ-like. And that is to me the biggest way that I can be an advocate for my faith. Because when I was a freshman at Point Loma going to chapel, I was like, there's something different about this place. There's something different about these people and how they're interacting with me. And I want to be that exact same way when someone is interacting with me. They're going to say, wait, Jordan's just a little bit different. Like there's something about her. And I hope that is Christ shining through me in those conversations.
mm. Okay, pause. I am a huge, huge fan of the way that you answered that question. One thing that you and I touched on at the beginning was how passion relates to driving action. Well,
Mm-hmm.
the third part to that, which we didn't necessarily get to, but you just did, which I'm like, yes, she said it, is that those two parts will get us to a point where people are wondering, so they'll ask.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the platform comes in, right? Because it takes that investigative period from those around us to go, wait a second, did you just say that? Or did I see that properly? Did that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then you go, that's exactly what I'm talking about. And that was tremendous for me because something I've been thinking about. I've done a podcast as well that was solely faith-based, that was all about the Christian athlete. And that was my last probably year or so. And what I began to realize is like, we're called as Christians to be in the world, but not of the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be exclusive in this way. I want to take the guardrails off and open the avenues for conversations, but it doesn't have to be directly pointed
Mm-hmm.
in such a way that may cause tension, and separation. And people's response will be to go against,
Mm-hmm.
and become less of a supporter or a fan based off of what you say. I
Yeah.
think more of what you said is it's about how you say it. It's about, can we be who we're called to be every day?
Mm-hmm.
Mm,
Yes. And that, when I talked about doubt
mhm,
and questioning, um, that is where a lot of my conversations lie these days of, well, am I supposed to, I have anxiety. I'm a very anxious person and I have doubt and I think about, am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to take this job? Am I supposed to be doing this? And that is constantly my conversations with God of like, okay, I open this door, walk through it. You are supposed to be here, maybe not to do well, but to meet somebody and to be
mm,
nice to somebody. Like, stop thinking so much about, is this going to push my career forward? Where it's like you were supposed to be in those rooms because you touched somebody by being kind to them, by buying them lunch, by giving them the shirt off your back, whatever it may be. That's
yes.
what you were supposed to be there for. And I think just in our society, we are so much hustle and bustle and the rat race of climbing the ladder and all of those things. And Brian, I'll tell you, after turning 30, especially, I have had this enormous sense of peace and calmness in regards to my career and the rat race and the ladder. I'm like, I don't care about it. Less and less. I'm like, okay, if I'm supposed to be here, if I'm supposed to have a job in the next couple months, if I'm supposed to do this, I will. And
Mm,
that has been a freeing experience because when you're a senior in college or when you're going through college internships, you are trying to get the biggest thing. What's the next job? How can I improve this? How can I do that? And I've just been go doing that for a really long time that I got to this place where I'm like, okay, let's sit back and realize that everything that you've done to this point is going to get you the next things. And God is going to he already has the plan, he already has the design. So try to be more in the passenger seat and not trying to drive and, move the steering wheel how I want it to be.
Mhm.
So that has been this season of life. And it's been challenging. It's not easier, but it has been better. So
Mm.
it's nice. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you again for being able to share and being willing to do so with me. I so appreciate it. One of the things that my mom has said more recently is, and especially as you mentioned, being a senior in college, trying to figure it out, feeling kind of that pull, tension,
Hmm.
rising a couple months away. The question is, okay, do I have the understanding of if it's meant to be for me, then it will be for me? And everything
Yeah.
else becomes obsolete and archaic. It's like it doesn't matter. There's no sense in me even thinking about
Hmm.
what isn't. Because then we're getting into the park of speculating and assuming things, and it's just wrong to be there.
Yeah.
Just the best thing I feel like I can do at this place is to keep going.
Absolutely. Keep going and don't, from speaking from experience and what I tell myself, what's meant for you is meant for you. And then when you get there, don't question why you're there because that was me. I'm like, wait, am I supposed to be here? Am I good enough to be here? And God's like, I put you here. What's meant for you is meant for you. And so keep going through that. And my prayer, especially when I'm waiting for my agent to give me good news or if I got a job, I say, God, if the door is meant to be closed, slam it shut. Like slam it. I don't want it to be like, oh, maybe. No, this is a no, and we are moving on. And I say, okay, great. That I don't have to think about that anymore because that door is slammed. And that is my constant prayer as I go through these things because I want doors to swing open, but if not, I want them to slam shut. And I just know that that was not for me. That was not meant for me.
Mm, mm. And I think you saying this is timely because we have 2025 coming up, which means
Hmm.
that there's grounds for new doors, new opportunities, closures, openings,
Yeah.
gateways. What are some of the things that you are looking forward to, that you're feeling good about, or what is coming down the track in 2025?
Yeah, well, I would say, definitely the book. The book has been such a labor of love so far, and it is far from being finished. So 2025 is going to be a lot of, the fun stuff, though. After we turn in the words, it's picking the photos and picking the graphics and the color schemes and the cover, because it should be out around November 2025. So getting ready for the women's hoop season, making a big push for holidays, gifts for your favorite women's basketball fan. So all of those things are gonna take up my 2025, and I'm kind of working with my husband and my agent to kind of fine tune what is it that I want to do. I think I'm at this really interesting point because I've taken these past like 3 months off technically to just be writing. And I kind of said I can't do anything else until after January, till after it's done. And that's allowed me to sit with what do I want to do moving forward. I had this conversation with my therapist. I was like, I'll be honest, I don't miss the anxieties of, right before going on camera or like being super, super nervous on trying something new. Like, is that my body trying to tell me something of like, this is nice to be in a relaxed state a little bit? Or that we need to just figure out exactly what that is that will have that passion and drive that action of, we do have to make money in this world, unfortunately. So I wish I could just watch basketball only, but we have to get paid to watch basketball. So we're gonna try that, but kind of fine tuning what exactly it is. And I'll be honest with you, I'm getting into this stage of life that me and my husband are wanting to grow our family. And that has been a huge part of what does my career look like
Mm,
as I'm pregnant, as I'm trying to grow our family. That has been heavily on my heart and in my prayer of this desire to be a mom and knowing that because I desire it so much in my heart that it will come true one day. But we're kind of trying to navigate that. And I think it's been surprising that once that became my focus, everything else was like I mentioned, it's going to fall into place and it's going to work out.
mm.
But we're kind of going through that as a family and working through that. But it's gonna be a good year. I know it. I know it's gonna be a good year because a lot of things are happening. But the good thing is women's basketball keeps happening. So we know when the seasons are gonna happen. I know I'm gonna be talking about it somehow, and we're just gonna keep on moving.
Oh, wow. Wow. I have to admit, this show has just exceeded every potential thing that I thought about. And I wanted to tell you that's a testament to you and thank you for being willing to do it with me. I'm so, so fortunate to be able to have these conversations and I so appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Nobody knows how long this has been in the works, so I'm so happy that
And they
we were
still won't.
finally able to do this. But
Yeah.
also, Brian, you are so, so good at this, and you are really, really good at this, and you ask very great questions that honestly I haven't personally thought about in a really long time. So that's what makes this conversation so easy. And I appreciate you for reaching out and asking me to be a part of this project and this podcast. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And you just made my day. That
Oh,
that is so good. Oh my gosh. And I'm really excited. And if, as we keep moving along here, I view everything that we've been able to talk about as resource for me. I certainly will look back on this show and go, okay, how can I jump to the next level? What's somewhere that I can go now? So the
mhm.
fact that I appreciate you for becoming that for me, for letting me speak on it and hear what you have to say.
Absolutely, no problem. I always think about, what I was saying from the very beginning of this podcast of my weird trajectory of a career.
Mhm.
Being nice to people and being Christ-like to people is what opened doors way down the line, years later that I didn't even know were doors open. So being kind and being respectful, is something that is not going to be necessarily a class that you take in college, but that is going to help you throughout your career. And that's something that being a follower of Jesus is what we know. And it helps you down the line, not only be a great person and to be able to pay it forward, but using those things is the way that we can show our faith and let it shine through us. But I appreciate this. This was a lovely conversation. Thank you.
Yes, undoubtedly. And for everybody listening on the Rec Room, have a great day, morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be at. And I'm so excited to keep this thing going and continuing to have conversations quite like this.